In this video, what we're going to talk to you is about how you must spend your years in the law college. How do you go about choosing internships? What kind of internships possibly are available in the institution? How do you go about mooting, which is moot courts? That's very, very important because you need to be standing in front of a podium and argue a case out. These are very, very important questions that students need to understand when they're actually getting into a law college, and you need to understand how you can actually optimize your time in a law college to get the best out of the law college. And that is what we're going to speak to the experts in this particular video, so that you are well prepared of what you should be doing in the law college, and also basis that you might also decide which law college to choose, because not all law colleges have a moot court, for example. Not all law colleges provide internships. Not all law colleges have research paper publication that is possible. And these are very, very important traits if you want to be a successful lawyer, and which is what we're going to speak in this particular video. What is the importance of internships in terms of you becoming a good legal professional?
Legal internship is of course mandatory according to the Bar Council. You have to do 5 of those for the undergrad 5-year degree. Now the way I think about internship is a short-term professional foray where you are learning something in the classroom and then you have a break where you go and experience the practice. The way this works is that the internship will have a mentor for you. When you go, so in the classroom you have a teacher, and outside the classroom you have other mentors, so somebody is coaching you for Moot, debates, research. In an internship you have this very experienced person who is either a litigator, a corporate law associate partner, or a researcher, a senior researcher. What you want to do is not think about whether it's prestigious, whether it's right or wrong. You want to think about how do I actually spend my 1 month learning what I have already learned and cementing those ideas. So what you're then doing is that you're contributing to someone's work, but you're also learning in the process. I would say that there are a lot of opportunities to do internship. I highly recommend that every law student does at least one, if not more, trial court internships. There are fundamental and other legal internship, other litigation internships. Even if you have aspiration for a corporate career, I think it's really important to do diverse internships. So there are so many opportunities now, including the tech firms, etc. But litigation, corporate, human rights, research, and now legal academia are some of the internships that students can take up. I think the application process varies from school to school. We at Jindal have a dedicated office called the OCAMP, which is basically an office that works with students on mentorship and facilitation of both internships and placements, where students have to sign up, send us the CV, and then we also do counseling to see that what they're interested in, because also you're spending 5 years, so your interests can change. You can start a law school thinking that you want to be a corporate lawyer, and then you might be inspired by a litigator along the way, and you might want to take up litigation. So I think internship should not be about only career aspirations. It should be about cementing the learning in the classroom. So when you enter an internship firm or litigation chamber, you should enter with the thought that this is a wonderful opportunity to cement all the learning that I've done in the classroom and then also contribute.
Now, we keep talking of internships, but there are some internships that really do not benefit the student. There are some internships that really, really benefit students, but some they don't benefit the student. So what role can law colleges play in getting the right internship for the student?
Many of the internships which students are doing, I would not generalize this, but I would say 80% of the students is just for the sake of doing internship. And I want to appeal to all the law schools, all the law firms. Let's take internships seriously. I think, when I talk to companies, when I talk to law firms, when I talk to lawyers, they have the point. How can a student come for a 4 weeks internships and say that these internships are going to be really important? I think the law school calendar ought to define, at least make sure students go for 4 to 8 weeks internships. I think these are meaningful internships. These are the meaningful internships where lawyers, I would say the partners, the law firms can give you some meaningful work to do. One, we need to relook at the duration of the internships. The moment we relook at the duration of the internships tend to become more serious. The second thing is, the law school should give internships for credits. Many of the time, internship is not for credits. It doesn't become part of your academic adventure. It doesn't become part of your academic course curriculum. Then what happens? People just take it for granted. But when you integrate internships with the course credits, then it becomes like the traditional liberal arts co-op programs where you're actually going to a law firm, you are actually spending time there, you're learning, you're giving yourself to be assessed by the law firms, and then that also validates in your transcript. Then it is like experiential learning actually being counted towards making the next generation lawyer. I think law schools ought to make internship for credits. The time has come. You cannot ignore practice-based approach. You cannot ignore learning that can happen at the law firm. How do you assess this? There are very interesting ways of doing it. I think law schools should come out very clearly to lay down a very clear platform for students to tell them internships are your integral part of curriculum, and it is not just you are leaving your semester after your exam, you're disappearing, you're doing internship. I don't think so. Those internships will have any more validation going forward. You look at what is happening in US law schools or US liberal arts schools, they are moving away from university-based curriculum to university and industry-based curriculum. They're happy to send and push students for 4 months out of their university to go and test themselves on the skills that they have acquired in the university. I think the law school is the best place where you can experiment co-op programs, where you integrate working in law firms as part of your core curriculum. That is when internships will have more meaningful, and I think that is when internships will get validated, and that is when students will also eventually start getting those amazing jobs which they may not be getting now.
The important thing that keeps coming back to us is, should the student choose to do internship in the very first year? Or is there some space and time that the student can take to understand the legal law as a career path and then choose to be doing an internship in the year 2 onwards?
I don't believe that first year students don't know law. First year students study some fundamental courses such as legal methods, tort law and contract law. So when I take interns, I used to take in my previous avatar, I was directing the Center for Justice, Law and Society. When they come into my center, they're able to do a lot of work. For example, in legal methods that I teach in the law school, I teach them how to brief a case, not just through IRAC method, but also to think through what the impact of this case law may be on the litigant, but also on the larger jurisprudence. So if you have an intern for a month, they can actually really contribute to your research through case law research, or just bringing in some ideas, give them a legal proposition, and they'll be able to give you a very strong response to that. So I think that training in the internship is very fundamental. At least even in my law school, when I look back, I learned a lot on my internship. So I don't think first year students are underqualified. I think this is a misnomer. They may not have read Constitution and Contract, but I think they've read the most important fundamental courses. So they're able to contribute in some way. Of course, as you move along and you do your Constitution, corporate law, admin law, you're able to contribute more fundamentally to some other aspects. But I have seen some really brilliant first year students interns, and I have seen some not so motivated and not so productive fourth year interns. So I think we should think of it as someone who really wants to learn and contribute, and who's on their way to becoming a lawyer.
A lot of law colleges have always underpinned the great importance of moot courts. Mooting is very, very important for you to become a great legal professional. Can you tell me, how does first of all a student understand? Explain to the student what moot courts mean, what mooting means, and what does it mean to a student that a good moot court exists in the college?
I read a very interesting book called The 21st Century Lawyer, written by Richard Susskind, and I would appeal all the students to study or read that book. The book talks about what are the important skills of lawyering and advocacy that students ought to develop, and what are the skills that are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, which we talk a lot about it today. It is very important for all of us to know that a lawyer who's going to represent in the court is going to be a human lawyer. The lawyer who's going to argue in the court is going to be a human lawyer. The lawyer who's going to stand in front of the court and articulate and defend the client is going to be a human lawyer. When all these things are to be done by a human lawyer, it becomes important that you understand the skills of lawyering. And where are you going to develop the skills? I think moot courts are absolutely, understated thing in law school. I'll tell you why. If you go and see the historical evolution of law, there was no formal education of law 300, 400 years back. People used to go to kings in court, queens in court. They used to argue in front of senior lawyers, and the legal education was informal, and it was developed through people making their informal arguments and understanding and developing the advocacy skill. The formal education or formal legal education developed only in the last 100 years, where there were JD programs that evolved which said what are the undergraduate programs. But if you look at the law schools which take mooting seriously will tend to produce better lawyers because you are being given an opportunity to stand up and speak and defend your arguments. I think that is the most important and rudimentary thing for any law student. And why I also say is it's not just mooting skills. When you are arguing, you have to draft your arguments. You have to do your research for drafting those arguments. As a law student, there has never been a day that I stopped reading. And I don't think so. Just this generation is reading as much as it should read. The more you read, the better drafts. The better drafts, the better arguments. The better arguments, the better advocacy.
Thank you for that question. So Moot is basically one of the most prestigious extracurricular, or it's now considered co-curricular in many institutions, including ours. Is an important activity. But I don't believe everybody can do mooting. It's highly competitive. Second, it requires a certain kind of orientation. So for example, the way I thought about Moot is that it's basically a stimulated exercise of an apex coach, right? Where you're actually working with a problem. So what are you doing? It's not the prestige of the Moot, but the process of doing a Moot, where you are researching a problem. So you're spending a lot of time researching. Then you're writing your memo. Then you're spending a lot of time writing. And then finally you're arguing, which is legal advocacy. So what you're doing, you're packaging the entire idea of law in practice, right? And that's what Moot allows you to do. And students who spend a lot of time, like you said, Viz or Jessa, they spend about 6 months just doing that. And they build a lot of skills. They become very strong advocates, they have very strong reading skills. So I think all of that is really great. And I think if you are going to be a mooter and you want to put in that hard work, it's really fantastic. And that's one of the primary activities for law schools in general. But I also think that law schools, you should also be doing other things, because it's how you're interested in multiple aspects of the work. So for example, I think that Jindal prioritizes research as well. So we do research colloquiums, we do a lot of research, we have a lot of research centers, we have students contributed research centers. There are students that we have a very active dance society. I think those are also important activities, because just confining yourself to mooting is not good enough. And I think while it's one of the activities that's important, but it's not meant for everyone. And students shouldn't have to feel disappointed for not being mooters. They can choose to not be mooters and do other things and do equally well in the legal profession. There are other activities as well. For example, there's a lot of emphasis we place on sports. Students engage with a lot of sports. Then students engage with debating, MUNs. So I think there is a lot of things that you can do. But I think there are also students who will not do any of these extracurricular activities. I've seen those students. They will just read their classroom readings very well. They will engage with the classroom very well. They will do very well in the internships, and they end up being very good lawyers. So I think there is no one fit all on how to be a good lawyer. But I think one thing that is non-negotiable to be a good lawyer is to get into the habit of reading closely and critically. I think these two are very important. Critical thinking is very centered to you becoming a good lawyer. And I think that is non-negotiable. And everything else can just add to you depending on how you feel about it. You don't have to be a mooter. But if you get an opportunity to do a moot, then of course it's great, because you learn so much in the process.
You heard from the experts of how you must actually use your ears in the law college. Now, a very big thing that students need to understand. You might not be in the best law college possible, but still there is a way of getting you using the entire facility that you have. You can actually join moot court competitions across the country and maybe across the globe also. You can actually do research papers and get them published not beyond the college also. And you can also seek out internships based on your own interest and intent that you have. And these are very important things for you to understand, and which is what I'm saying, very important for you to know that a law career path is not in the classroom but beyond the classroom. How you do your research, how do you argue your case out, and how you do the internships, these are very, very important for you, and which is what we try to explain in this particular video. Watch for the fourth one that we're going to talk about, which is essentially about the career paths that you will have after law. So we've done a series of videos now. Please watch this series. We're doing a 5-part series in this whole thing. Please watch this series before you pick up law as a career path.